All right, guys, we are here today with Angie Clark. She is the owner of Essential Elements Wellness. She is a psychic, healer, channel, herbalist, exorcist, spiritual guide, and master teacher. So you can check her out. She does all kinds of amazing things. But at Victory of Light, she did a talk called Darkness, Cleansing and Protecting Yourself from Haunting and Attachments. So just some amazing, amazing stuff that we can learn and wisdom that we can glean from her. So Angie, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, as you said, I do work as a psychic, as an intuitive, and I do a lot of different modalities of healing work. I have been trained in Reiki and other forms, and I kind of just channel at this point and allow whatever comes in to come in. I call it guided meditation, but really what it is kind of stepping between spaces and, it's hypnosis and theta brainwave state, but we just call it guided meditation and energy work because it changes so much. It's hard to put a label on it because for every single person that I work with, it's different and unique. I do work on a very individual basis, and I work from varying levels of need. I do work as an herbalist and very basic body wellness needs, full intuitive and kind of restructuring and helping to heal on the physical level, as well as, from everything in between there, clear up into being a direct channel, delivering messages and helping you grow your own spiritual brand of connection, energy, and how you work with the universe. Been doing this for professionally for about 12 years. Got here like everybody else with health and life crisis and didn't realize that this is why I am the way I am. And it's a healer's journey is all about healing ourselves as well as and staying humble, as well as working with others who are around us. So the more that I continue to evolve, the more things I can bring to the table.
Yeah, I think it's amazing what you end up finding as you go through your own personal journey is the experiences that you've had and the experiences that you've worked through are the exact thing that you can help other people deal with. Because there are so many people, we get this idea sometimes that we're alone and we're the only ones struggling through this stuff when there's 100 million other people out there that are struggling through the same stuff we're struggling through. We're not by ourselves. And as we get to that other side of it, we have a wealth of information that we can give and we can help other people with as they're going through the same stages of development that we were.
Exactly. A lot of times when I'm able to pull from those experiences in my own life and hardships and struggles and things that I've moved my way through and worked with, there's a sense of gratitude that I feel having been through that I have the skills and capability of being able to sit down across from this person and be able to offer not just psychic skills, but really compassion and understanding. And that's where the real connection comes in. And that's where we're the most effective as healer people.
I think that's when it becomes real, when we can get to that place where we're grateful for the experiences, even the negative experiences that we've had. We're grateful for those things because of what it can bring to the table and what it can help other people with. So they don't have to go through the same incredible pain that we went through dealing with these instances. And sometimes it's not painful. Sometimes it's wonderful, great stuff that they need to work through and they need to get to. But often we find that it is difficulty and pain that we've struggled with that we can help other people with. And it's beautiful when we get to that place where we're grateful for those things and grateful for being able to have been put in those situations and allowed the ability to make it through as well as we have. So one of the things that I don't mention a whole lot is that I also do Reiki. I'm a level 2 Reiki person. I haven't gotten my level 3 attunement yet, but I've gotten that far. And I am a former yoga teacher. I guess not former. I'm still a yoga teacher. I just haven't really been teaching yoga in the last probably 2 or 3 years. But for about 6 or 7 years, all I did was teach yoga. It was a lot of fun. So.
Right. And, I do promote, I do a lot of physical body work with people with energy also, with realigning of the spine and letting go of emotional things and restrictions that are located within the muscle tissues. And I'm one who constantly is promoting yoga because it works on multi-levels, actually. So it isn't just working with stretching and moving the body. There's a spiritual component too, where you're actually connecting, and really surrender's a big deal because we don't do that much as people.
That is a challenge. Working with men, right?
Mm-hmm.
And dealing with them in coaching situations, it is difficult to get men to that place where they have to surrender to things, because as men, we're always taught, you need to be the alpha, right? You need to be the best at everything. You need to be the top, and you need to compete with everybody. And the trick is that we have to surrender, right? We have to surrender to life. Like, life is what it is. It's going to flow. It's going to ebb. It is what it is. And we have to surrender to those things. And the thing that I always struggle with, or not that I struggle with, but what I help other people deal with, is that vulnerability that we need to have in that moment. Because surrender is a lot about being vulnerable and allowing ourselves to be open to those things that are going on and allowing them to happen. And men specifically struggle with being vulnerable and being open to the people that they're around, because we've always got this hard exterior. And trying to figure out a way to get them to do that just completely transforms who they are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it does make a tremendous difference. Women are the kind of the polar opposite of that, where they struggle with not being vulnerable. And a lot of times they've taken on that masculine role to cover up their own hurts and wounds and inability to be able to surrender into that softer side that they have. I think we're moving in general with a lot of the activations and things that are coming in energetically, and the big portals and things that are opening. The one yesterday, 12/12 especially, has to do with those higher levels of partnership and bringing those male and female elements back together.
Yeah.
Both within each person individually and within new levels of partnership, and being able to hold partnerships in a much higher standard than what we have up to now.
I think, I talk a lot about this. I wrote an article about this not too long ago, just about the fact that we both, men and women, we both hold masculine and feminine energy, and we have to be in balance with those things. Right. So no matter if you're a man or a woman, figuring out that balance that works for you is what's important, so that we can live fulfilling lives, because we might be too much masculine energy. And not enough feminine. We don't have that softer side, and we need to figure out a way to balance that if we're going to be able to have the lives that we want to lead, and we want to be comfortable and fulfilled. So really learning that, and I have a wonderful teacher. My fiance teaches me all the time because she is very feminine, and I'm very masculine. So I get to learn all the time what it means to be more feminine and to draw us both closer to the center, so that we fulfill one another. And we help each other to figure that out. And those times, and it is all about being aware and being open.
Right. Yeah. Being aware and being able to listen is 90% of the battle, really. Because we listen through our triggers. And, when you're talking about balancing those things out, your heart's invested in most relationships, whether it's friendship, intimate, or family. Your heart's invested to some level. And there is a level of vulnerability. And a lot of times what people hear is their own triggers instead of hearing what's actually being said. So being able to openly listen and be objective is 90% of the battle when you're talking about how to integrate all of those things in together anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. I working with men, it's not just relationships, right? It's the relationships that we have in life, whether that's at work, whether that's somewhere else. And men, we've been taught to not care about what other people think or how other people feel, right? And it's really, it's a challenge in the society in which we live in, because everybody is affected by everything that happens, right? We're all affected by the energy that enters the room. You have those people that walk in that either add energy or drain energy. And, we have to figure out how we fit into that. Who are we? How are we energetically affecting the people around us? It's so important. And it's why a lot of men get themselves in trouble, right? They struggle with all kinds of problems because they don't understand that. They're just not aware enough to understand that what they say, how they act, affects everything else around them, and they cause themselves all kinds of problems. So, I get the unique ability to really raise that awareness and help them take some real looks at themselves and say, hey, maybe what I'm doing is not the most appropriate thing. Maybe I need to take a step back and look at how I'm acting and how I'm interacting with those people around us so that it doesn't become an issue. And that's all about working with that energy and that masculine and that feminine.
Right. Yeah, I've been working a lot with, and it's a pretty recent thing that I've brought in. After I left the Victory of Light there, I went to the Serpent Mound, which, I tend to visit some sacred places. So I went there and I got a pretty large download about moving the actual molecule of love within the DNA strands within the body, and how to move energy and magic a little bit less on the masculine scale. How they kind of explained it to me was, instead of pointing at like a magic wand at something and demanding it to change, it's more about supporting and nurturing and allowing things to bloom and taking the path of least resistance. So I've been working a lot with that and about helping people integrate that back into their DNA, back into their life, helping them to be able to open up to the gifts of the universe. We do it a lot on an emotional and spiritual level, but we have not been doing it on a physical level and actually bringing that into our physical lives. So this is a little different level and integrating things just a little bit differently than what we have been doing thus far.
Yeah, a lot of what I do when it comes to that is I do very physical stuff, because I do like these crazy endurance events, right? So bringing people to really figure out how to get over obstacles, like physical obstacles and physical challenges, and how that relates to their mental and spiritual obstacles and challenges that they're going through. So it's really interesting. So you talked at Victory of Light about cleansing and protecting yourself from hauntings and attachments. Something that, it's really funny. I grew up in a household that I went through a lot of abuse as a kid and struggled with a lot of things. My ex was very empathic, was very psychic. And I went home one time to go see my mom. And my mom is where all this stuff stemmed from. And when I came back, something came with me, right? So I had this very ugly, nasty entity with me when I came back. And we had to take some time. It took several months to unattach what was going on. And it was really interesting, because I got to see a very different perspective than I understood when I was a kid, because all this stuff had happened. And what I didn't realize is that my mom, she told us a story of when she was a kid. And I'm half Filipino. I'm half Filipino, a quarter German, a quarter Polish. So as a kid, she mentioned that there were a lot of stories in the area that she lived in about this demon that sat in the mango trees, right? And we didn't realize, what that had to do with anything. But she told this story that she had seen that at one time. So I looked it up in a demonology book, and sure enough, in the Philippines, there is this specific thing, and apparently this has been following her for all of her life. So it was really interesting to see that, and to see her personality and how that affected her throughout her life. So it's really interesting to me to see what you think and how you deal with all of that.
I started out in this world, and I don't use a lot of technical terms, and I haven't done a lot of research, so I'll give that disclaimer right now. Every time I've tried to do formal research or know the terminology or any of that, I get really sick, and I will either pass out or vomit. My guides do not want me to look at anybody else's story, how it works for them. It really is more about me trusting them and letting them show me how to deal with it than getting distracted by anything else. Not that that's right, wrong, or indifferent. It's just how they work with me specifically. So the way that I describe things is there's probably a real good term for it, or one that other people might know, but I don't use them because also names give things power.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't often label them because they just are shadow beings that work in that realm. But I did start out, I've been doing that work as long as I've been doing energy work, being able to clear things, move things out, because I started there, and really early on in my journey. Sometimes these things get attached to family lineage and they follow your family around, which you may have something like that going on in yours, at least with your mom in particular. And sometimes it comes from past generations. Sometimes it comes from just the person being open. But an actual demon is not really very common. Most of the time what we see when things call themselves demon is really they're a shadow being, which in my opinion, they're far more terrifying anyway, because they have the ability to get in, know your deepest, darkest fears, and they play on those, and they manipulate what you see, what you feel, what you experience, in order to gain fear. All of those beings feed on the energy of fear. It's what they're after. It's what they want. And when you don't give it to them, they don't really want to play with you anyway. They do go after people who are empathic because they're the ones that can see, hear, and feel it. And they're easy targets. A lot of times what will happen is if the person isn't real trusting and we release something that has a specific identity or picture or vision associated with it, if the person is not 100% convinced that that thing is gone, another being will slide in, take that same identity, and now you have the same issue rolling again. Mm. But it is really another being. They've just stepped into something they already know, gains them immediate access to the fear that they're looking for. So, like I said, this started out with my own family. I had something that it was very demonic. It was very snake-like. Had a beak, very, hooded robe, hissed like a snake. And I had never seen it, I grew up in a house. I was not initially a person who saw. I wasn't visual. My mom and sister are very clairvoyant. I was not. I'm the feeler, the cognizant, and the other things primarily. That gift has opened over the years, but I didn't start there. So I didn't see this thing that everybody else described and saw. My daughter saw it when she was a little kid. And when she was 3 and 4, she spent more time glued to my leg than anything else because she was dealing with this. And learned how to move things because it was a matter of necessity because of what I was dealing with in my own house and with my own family stuff. Have discovered it actually came from a curse from one of my ancestors on my mom's side. Kind of a long and interesting story, but it was deserved, but not really deserved by the descendants that it was put on. So it's caused a lot of damage over the years, a lot of poverty, a lot of heartache, a lot of loneliness. And it just continued to fuel and build as it went down the generation and down through the DNA strands.
Wow. It's really amazing how far-reaching those things go. We don't often think about that. That it really does. It attaches itself and it changes. How people behave, how people act, like the belief systems that they hand down. So it really does affect everything because we know now that, that what our parents taught us as children continue throughout our entire life, right? We continue to deal with those things, whether they're positive or negative. We continue to deal with those things. And now having something else attached to that it's continually like prodding that area, right? And continuing to push those buttons to get you into that state of fear. So it's energizing that is really challenging. And it does have far-reaching consequences for generations.
Right. They also drive addiction. and addiction-based behaviors. Because the easiest way for them to gain access to the physical body is for you to step out of it, which is what happens when you're using alcohol or drugs of any kind, and they're able to step in. So when you see somebody who has alcohol issues, who drinks a lot and becomes someone else, 90% of the time they don't, they'll tell you they didn't do something, they didn't say something, they didn't, something else did. And that's the reason that, historically it's called spirits, because our ancestors knew that those things hung around where they could gain access easily to people.
It's always been interesting to me. I know lots of people that have all kinds of gifts. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of times they struggle with those gifts. And then they turn to whatever it is, drugs and alcohol, to get some release, because the gifts are so intense that they need to numb themselves to get away from some of that. Whether it's, they're constantly hearing voices and constantly, hearing these things going on around them, they need to numb themselves. And it's, I've experienced a lot of that.
Mm-hmm. Right. And, it is my personal opinion that most people who are schizophrenic are hearing something, but it just isn't nice.
Yeah.
And they're manipulating and sending them in to do things. And I'm sure that most people have seen somebody who's committed a horrific crime, and you look at them and you can just tell, like, they don't even look human. Like there's something about their demeanor and their eyes that they don't look human. It's because they're not. So my term is they're not driving their bus.
Man, I was in a coffee shop in Pittsburgh. I went to college there, and I was doing a lot of work in the church at the time. And I went to this coffee shop, and I talked to this homeless guy there. And he obviously had some issues and everything. We had a great conversation, super intelligent guy. And all at once, completely, his facial expressions, his eyes, everything changed. Mm-hmm. And he started talking all kinds of crazy stuff that he was not saying 5 minutes before that. It was almost like somebody stepped, he was a shell, and somebody stepped behind that, and I could see those eyes. It was crazy. It was one of the only experiences I've had in my life where it was a physical change. I saw it, I experienced it, and it was probably as close to possession as I've ever seen. And it was a unique experience, and it was scary. I was like, I don't know that I want to hang around those kind of experiences too much in my life.
Right. Right, because at that point you don't really know what the person is going to do, because it's not really a person, and you have no idea what kind of behavior you're going to get out of them, because the energy about them changed completely.
One of the things that I was thinking as you were talking about this, as a kid, and I don't think I've ever really talked about this before, but as a kid, I used to hear all kinds of voices, right? Mm-hmm. There were things, and I'm sure that if they would have tried to diagnose me as a kid, they would have said I was schizophrenic, because I heard all kinds of voices, and they were not nice. I was going through lots of crazy stuff in my household at the time, so they kind of attributed to the abuse and all those things that were going on. But I remember that. Now, as I've gotten older, I've become better equipped at dealing with those things, and have built up the walls and things so that I don't have those types of experiences anymore. But it's interesting, as children, we're so much, just like you were mentioning your daughter, seeing that, we're so much more open to those things than we are as we get into adulthood, which is why we need help as adults to really rediscover those gifts. And I don't think it's that we're gaining gifts, but rediscovering the things that we already have, right? That we had when we were children, that we've gotten away from because of the constructs of the belief systems that we've gained over the years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. One of the places that I see the most interaction with negativity, and where people are the people who are waking up, and they're trying to connect with guides and trying to, figure out what their gifts are and move into that place. And there are a lot of ways to divine things. And I will just put this out there as information. anything that you use to divine, whether it's oracle cards or Ouija boards or whatever that is, it's important to know how to bless it and how to know what you're talking to. I actually did a reading for a girl, and when she came into my booth, I was immediately on edge because I knew she had an attachment issue. And she argued with me because I told her, I said, you've been playing with a Ouija board, you don't know what you're talking to. And she said, no, it's my aunt. She knew my middle name. And I'm like, oh my goodness, anything on the other side knows your middle name. And unless you're very clear about how you ask, you don't know what you're talking to. So we did a clearing for her and moved it out, and I warned her to be careful about, you know, what it is that you're communicating with. The way that I always teach all of my students whenever we're working with this or opening things up, and I still do this even with guides and familiars, and they half the time, you know, look at me like I'm a ding-a-ling, like, really? I look at them and say, are you of light? And I do it all the time. Are you of light? And they're like, of course I am. You know, like, what are you talking about? We work together all the time. I'm like, just checking. Because I don't, because of the work that I do, I don't want to be fooled. And I've watched a lot of people in this world who've been doing this kind of work for a long time. And I've had friends who are incredibly gifted and opened the doors to the wrong guide. And they changed, and their behaviors changed, and their everything about them was different. So I'm very careful about what I'm talking to and when. So as you guys are working through all of your opening and growing and learning, that's the key word. Are you of light? If you don't get an answer, they are not allowed to lie to you. They have to tell you. The only thing that doesn't apply to that are electronic things, but that's so rare that they don't speak anyways. And that's just a blob of energy and electricity that is bizarre. But for the most part, they all have to operate within that. And especially when you're working with spirits or mediumship or people who are open in that realm, and I'm like, oh, I have children ghosts. That immediately sets me on edge because most children don't hang around. I've been doing clearings and exorcisms for almost 12 years, and I've only seen one child. The rest of them have been something else. You got to remember, these beings of shadow will take whatever form to gain trust, to gain your confidence, to be able to step into that level of communication with you, because then once they're attached, they can show you who they really are and start bringing forward those levels of fear so that they can get what they need and gain power.
So with that, the first part of that is your talk was about cleansing and protecting.
Mm-hmm.
So we've talked about the entities themselves, what they are, how they attach, the fear that they feed off of. So how do we cleanse ourselves and protect ourselves from that?
There's a variety of tools out there that we can use. I don't really use tools, so I'll kind of go over the basics of the tools, and then I'll kind of describe what I do energetically. But there's all different kinds of sages, Palo Santo, all different kinds of herbs that are used traditionally throughout different cultures to cleanse and open space. Cedar, mugwort, they all do this. Some of them just clear the slate, and you need to put good energy back in. That's not a common known thing. So if you just use white sage, you want to put some positive energy back in the space because it's an indiscriminate cleanser and just wipes the entire slate clear. With any cleansing, it's just as important to have your mind in the right space as it is to have the right herbs or tools, because that's all they are, is the herbs and the tools. Energy is moved by intention. So you have to have your mind in the right space and not being able to be fearful. So what I tell people to do is imagine your fear like a light switch and shut it off. And visualize this big, huge bubble of white light and love that's coming out of the heart. And you're kind of projecting that out as you are cleansing the space and using the words. Anything negative, the thing that they don't want to hear the most is I love you and I hope that you have a beautiful existence. They really don't like that. And most of the time they'll just leave with that. But you cleanse the entire space. You take these herbs or sprays. There's a lot of really great things that you can use that you don't have to burn, especially if you're in an office space or cleansing something like that where it's not really an appropriate thing. And I always joke around because some of these herbs have a questionable smell. So sometimes you want to opt for sprays, especially if you are in a workplace, because that's not always, something that people are open to. But it's really about the energy and the intention that you're putting out there. Like, I ask for this space to be filled with light, letting go of all negativity. Whatever verbiage your mind chooses is going to be appropriate, as long as it's in your mind frame is in the right place. So, and a lot of people have different rituals. I tend to go clockwise. I'll start in one spot and work my way through the entire part of the house. But really, when I take tools, I use it to really just, make it look like I'm doing something, because I'm doing the real work with what I'm seeing and feeling visually. I set pillars of white light around space. So I'll start in one corner, and it goes from the center of the earth clear up into the universe. And these pillars of light are like they look almost like a chain link fence that goes around an entire property. And then I expand it out. But I also ask for whatever stones or energy is in the earth to be able to pull all that negativity in and transmute it into something better. So I do most of my cleansing visually and not as much with the tools. There's stones. A lot of stones are really great. The ones that ground and protect: obsidian, tiger's eye, Apache tears. It depends on exactly what you're doing energetically to help cleanse and clear yourself. So it depends on what emotion you're dealing with as to what stones are best for you. But there's multitudes of cleansing, clearing, and supporting stones. And sometimes it's a matter of just clearing out the emotion that these things are attracted to. The higher your vibration, the better your mood, the less they can touch you. So you want to raise the vibration of your mind, you want to raise the vibration of your body, you want to raise the vibration of your space, and they can't get that close to you anyway. I do a visual. For me anymore, I just call it my force field. I operate on humor, and that's how I tend to teach people to work with this. But I call it my force field just because it reminds me of Star Wars, and I think it's funny. But the actual visual that goes along with it is you bring in white light from above, and it comes down through your chakra system in the middle of your crown and comes down in and moves right down into the heart. All empaths are sensitive in the heart and solar plexus area, other places too, but that's the primary place where energy is centered for those people. So you bring the white light down, and then you bring green light up from the earth, and it comes up your feet, travels up the spine, and meets that white light in the heart. Allow those things to kind of combine and move throughout the body, and then you make a bubble around yourself. And you ask your guides and all of your guardians to keep you protected and keep you safe, and only allow positive energy to come into that bubble. And I tell people when they're first learning to do this, I'm like, go in a grocery store, set that up and go in a grocery store, and then watch how people act toward you. Some people will stare at you and they don't know why they're doing it. And other people will run away from you like they're on fire. And that's what you ask for. So don't take those things personally. You want them to go. Those are the people that you don't want to talk to because they're in a negative space.
So with that, completely off the topic, but I'm a huge Star Wars fan. And I am was a member of the 501st. I have an Imperial officer uniform here at the house. I have some Biker Scout armor in a storage unit not too far away from here. So, I love Star Wars. It's ridiculous. Between Star Wars and Doctor Who, I did a photo shoot one time where I legit had my son believe that I was the 13th Doctor. It was great. He was maybe, 8 years old. It was great. I took this photo shoot, and in the photo shoot, there's dialects in the photo shoot. So he was like, "Daddy, you're going to start filming that?" I was like, "Yes, I am." It was great.
Yes. Yeah. And when I forget to set up my protections or whatever in the morning, and the green and white light are just initial visuals, those are going to change. So as you use this process, what you feel like needs to come in on a daily basis will change. Sometimes it'll be purple, sometimes it'll be gold, sometimes it'll be brown, whatever that energy is, you change it. But I've done this so much that when I yell force field, my muscle memory already knows that that's the process that takes place. So I don't have to go through all the steps because my energy system already knows that's what it's supposed to do.
Yeah, that's interesting because I teach people that all the time with when we're in fitness, right? Because I do a lot of fitness stuff. So like a lot of the techniques and everything are all muscle memory. That's it, right? It just takes a little while for your body to get used to the movements, whatever they are. So energetically, it's the same way, right?
Yes.
So whether you're throwing punches or kicks, whatever it is that muscle memory that eventually, after doing it repetitiously for however long it takes, your body will get used to doing that same thing. And then it's faster, stronger. You know, it's incredible. You know, when I started out doing martial arts when I was 6 years old, I started boxing when I was 7, right? I did professional mixed martial arts for from 2001 until about 5 years ago when I retired. When I started out, I was terrible. Like, you know, they used to take me in the gym and just whoop me all the time. It was terrible. Like I got beat up all the time. So, but it took me years of doing the same thing over and over, dedicating that part of my life to it, to really figuring out how it worked. And then all of a sudden, 15 years later, I'm training other people and they're all like, oh my God, you hit so hard, Jeff. You do all this. How do I do that? It just takes time, right? It's just that muscle memory. Eventually your body will fall into the pattern and it will just be stronger, more efficient, better. It's the same thing with endurance events. I am a top level endurance event guy, right? And it took me time to get there. It's just conditioning yourself to be as good as you possibly can at that. Anybody can learn anything and become good at it if they put enough time in and they do the repetition work, whether it's protecting yourself or whether it's going out there and doing some kind of sport activity.
Yeah, I tell people all the time when they're working with energy growth or whatever, the number one question that I'm always asked is, well, how do I get better? How do I make this gift stronger? And the answer is the same thing you just said, is use it. If you're not using it, if you're not connecting with it, it doesn't get stronger. You know, I started out a long time ago with a tiny bit of tingling in my right hand, and that was it. You know, and people said they felt something, so I kept doing it. And now what I do is completely channeled, and you know, what I'm doing now compared to where I started is not even close to the same thing. So the more that you use it, the more that you're allowing yourself to surrender and step into it, the stronger and better those gifts get. And it is dedication. You know, it's walking this path has cost me as much as it's gifted me. There have been a lot of very painful events that I've been through, as most healers have and go through. But it's been worth the ride. It's been worth the journey, and all of the things that I'm able to provide and work with others, and the things I'm able to share are worth the steps that it took to get there. But it is a memory. It is a muscle memory, and it is something like, even if I go on vacation for a couple weeks and don't do any readings or energy work, a little rusty with the first person that steps in for a few minutes.
Well, I think you mentioned it there too. There's managing that fear that happens, right? Because especially in energy work, something that's not physical that everybody can see, it becomes a challenge because, you know, you're always wondering like, all right, is this really working? Is this really helping somebody? And obviously the results are yes, but in the moment, it's a challenge to feel that. So that fear steps in and you feel that. One of the things, and this is, you know, similar thought pattern, but I used to speak on stage all the time, right? I pastored and I talked every weekend to people, several hundred people at a time. So doing that, when I first started speaking in front of crowds, I was nervous, right? I was scared. There was a lot of fear there. That fear has never ended. It's always scary, but I've learned to manage that fear, right? So now I can get up, and instead of being afraid and putting up all those walls, now I stand up in front of people and I'm completely energized by them because I've learned how to manage that fear. I've learned how to take that energy and transmute it into something that will help me help them. So now I can stand up in front of 5,000, 6,000 people without any problem and just stand up there, share my story, and allow them to get what they need from it. And it's just managing that fear and knowing that it's not me that needs to give them anything. It's
Mm-hmm.
them that needs to take that and internalize it and figure out how that works for them. And I
Right.
think it's the same thing when we get into coaching, any kind of spiritual endeavor, that
Mm-hmm.
we as a person can't help anybody, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's up to them to decide and to make the choices of how the information that we're offering them is going to help them and answer those questions that they have, because they have to figure out the answers for themselves. I can't
Right.
walk anybody through anything. I can't
Right.
hold your hand and make something change. You have to figure out what the right questions are and what those answers are to make what you need happen.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think as a healer, the hardest thing for any of us to do is to let go of the outcome,
Yeah.
because we want so badly for that healing to happen and for that person to find what they need, but we aren't responsible for that. I have a rule: anybody who comes in my office or anybody who I do a reading for, when you leave, you take all of your stuff with you. You take it all with you because you have to figure that out. I've given you everything that I can, and when you're there, you have 1,000% of my attention. And I've given you everything that I've gotten, everything that has come in. And there are times where I think, I don't even know what I gave them. I hope it was worth, what, or it was even close to something they were hoping for. But sometimes you have the answer and people aren't willing to hear it. And those are times where I've had to, tell the person, I love you, but this is not, you're not ready for what you're going to have to do just yet. So go home and support yourself and nurture those parts, and then we'll try again. But we hold space. That's what a healer does. We don't heal anybody. We're not responsible for their journey. And you can't, and everybody wants a roadmap. We want a clear, concise, way of how we're supposed to get from point A to point B. And I would dearly love that myself, because there are times where I'm like, really? I have no clue how this is supposed to work out. But it does somehow or other. And we get from point A to point B. But it's about you finding the courage and the action steps and all of the things that work together to balance out the spiritual and the physical to get you from point A to point B. And I, a lot of times, feel like I'm a floundering fish. And, I apparently do it with some grace because people never really notice. But those who know me well know that that whole confidence thing where you talked about being nervous, I think that's part of it for all of us, because we are, empathic people tend to be pretty shy, and you can pick up on energy and how people feel about you, what they're seeing, what they're thinking. And it does lend to you wanting to just go crawl under a bench and say, no, I'll try again tomorrow. I don't really want to do that today. And, even working, and as long as I still get nervous. I take a good 15 minutes before I go speak at any large event to go work out my nerves and get myself in the place where I need to be. And when I step up there, it's like taking on another persona. So that's a pretty common thing. And I had a friend tell me once, another really talented psychic, she said, if you're not ready to throw up, it's not worth doing. So I must do some really worthwhile stuff, because I feel like that fairly often.
Yeah, I was on a call yesterday, and one of the things that we talked about was just that we are constantly changing, we are constantly evolving. Our message changes as things develop in our lives. So what we're doing right now may not be what we're doing a year from now, right?
Mm-hmm.
It may not be the exact same thing. Things open up, culture changes. A lot of us that are doing, healing work, doing coaching, all those things, any kind of spiritual work, any kind of teaching, as things open up and as things develop in the culture, those things affect us differently. So it opens up different opportunities to maybe move in a different direction. For me, when I started coaching, I had that idea, like, I'm going to be able to help everybody with this whole transformational thing. It's going to be great. And then what I realized very quickly is what I'm good at is things that I've struggled with. So, oddly enough, I'm a guy. It may be easy for me to work with men that are struggling with similar things that I struggled with. Mm-hmm. And, there's a very large movement out there where men have been less than kind to women. Mm-hmm. And, we've grown up with that culture. And now there is this outcrying of women who are becoming aware They're standing up for themselves and saying, this can't continue. The problem is that men have not gotten to the place where they're aware enough to understand that those things are not just women overreacting, that they are real issues that men have struggled with for years and years and years and have not dealt with. This idea of, you know, not respecting people and everything and not respecting anything but themselves is a problem. And unless they deal with those issues, they're going to continue to struggle with the same things that are going on now. And the consequences are getting worse and worse for them. So being able to honor the people around you and really show them the love and the care and the compassion that they deserve just for being people is incredibly important where we're at right now. Now, a year from now, that issue may not be a big deal. And it may be something else that I need to work on with people. But right now, that is where I'm at. So, you know, it's incredible how life flows and things change. People always need healing. They always need help to work through their processes. But what that looks like and what those focuses are change as the world turns.
Right. Yeah. Well, and, you know, I've noticed, you know, I have several clients weekly. So as I move through from week to week, from day to day, the themes will change. So the energy that's moving in as we're opening these portals and these, the new downloads and things that come in, it changes every day, you know, and there's a common theme, and you'll notice that, you know, people tend to be in a common place where they're all struggling with one thing or another. And that's what you work with that week. And like I said, at the beginning of my journey, where I was at was very basic, and I would just stand there and hold space, and whatever is best, I just trust that the universe will give them that. And I still do that because it was my way of stepping out of the way. But, you know, the things that I see and move and visualize are a whole lot different. So it does change, and we do adapt, and we grow, and we bring in new stuff. And, you know, like I said, the stuff that I'm working with is relatively new. So the big downloads and the things that I'm working with people on, and the DNA shifting that I'm working with, it's relatively new. It's only been within the last month. So, and it's big stuff. It's rethreading and recoding behavior, chemistry, and a lot of things that go on in body processes, and addiction to negative events. You know, we're trained to think that we don't deserve things. So we are conditioned to and addicted to bringing negative things into our world.
Yeah. And that is a whole nother topic that people really deal with. You know, they wonder why they're stuck in these negative cycles. And there has to be a reason behind it, right? There has to be something that it's giving them, or they wouldn't stay there. Because if they could find something better, they would go with that. But instead, they choose to stay in those negative things because it's feeding one of their human needs, right? It's feeding something, whether it's this need for significance because people are now catering to them. When they're talking about how depressed they are, everybody wants to take care of them. So they stay depressed because people continue to take care of them. So figuring out why people stay in those places is so important in giving them freedom from that, where they could have things that are so much better, so much more fulfilling, but they just haven't figured out what that is to get them to that place. So yeah, dude, that is a whole nother topic. Right. Tough. But it's funny to me that even our terminology for things change, right? Because 10 years ago, we wouldn't say download. We would say something else, right? Because now that we have computers and the internet and we're downloading things all the time, now we get it as downloads, right? Before that, it was called something else. It's just funny how even the terminology, as things move on and as our world progresses, changes. And if you talk to somebody like that's, you know, 60 years or 70 years old, right? They don't understand the same terminology that we use today. You might say download, and they might be like, well, what the hell are you talking about? Download? I don't know what that is. You know, and it's just interesting. You know, you might say to them, you know, receiving messages, you know, because they understand that. That's terminology that they used. And it's just really, it's really neat to see how that all is constantly changing, and we're constantly moving in this direction, and just trying to get as many people engaged as possible. So with that being said, we're coming close to an hour. So let us know how people can reach you, how they can how they can contact you if they would like more information.
Well, I'm available on Facebook. It's under my name. It's Angie Clark. Psychic, Intuitive, and Healer is the actual page title, so you can like that. I do have a store, so there's, if you're interested in the spiritual tools, there's eewshop.com. It is still a work in progress, so be patient with that. My direct email is essentialelementswellness@yahoo.com. And you can also check out my website, which is angieclarkhealer.com. There's a list of services and local events. I do live in Florida, so I do some beach meditation events, and I've got some classes and things that are going to be offered, and online call-in on Wednesdays that I'm going to call Wednesday Wisdom. I think I'm going to start that the first of the year. So there's a lot of ways to keep track of what I'm doing and where I'm putting things. So stay tuned, because there's a lot more evolving. There's some classes and events that are going to take place this year. They just haven't been ironed out with the holidays as of right this moment.
Nice. Well, thank you for everything, and
Sure.
really coming and talking with us and sharing your knowledge and wisdom with us. We will definitely be in touch, and we will talk some more as things develop, and keep in touch.
Sounds good. Thank you for having me.
Awesome. Well, thank you for taking the time.
Sure.